So, you've probably seen the ad of Charlie Morgan talking about 101 ways that you can use to get clients in his beautiful British accent. And I ended up going through that entire funnel, buying all of his upsells and paying him $48,000 to go to his masterminds and such. So, in this video, I'm going to break down the main three things that I learned from working with him over the last 2 years. And you can tell me if you think that I have been very stupid with my investments, and make sure to leave a mean comment down below telling me how dumb I am. So, the first thing that I learned is the simple fact, and this was one of the earlier things that I learned from him, is that business is simply a collection of numbers. So, I will break down what this means and how I have applied it into appointment setting and getting more clients. So, basically, the idea is that when you are doing things in business, the most important thing is, number one, how hard you work, but also where you are working. And in order to know if you are working in the right direction, you must have targets, right? You must know where you are working towards in order to make sure you're working in the right direction. So basically, what I have learned is that you can break one of these agency coaching online businesses into three main factors. Number one is the volume of meetings that you are getting. Number two is the amount of those meetings that are showing. And number three is the amount of those shows that are closing. And then obviously there's product as well, which you need to make sure is in tow. But if you have a good product, that's not really a concern. So I will walk through how I have used these three numbers and how I have very heavily looked at these and how I continue to look at these in order to make sure that I'm working in the right directions. So basically, you need to be able to contrast your numbers against two different variables. So that is people who are in a similar space as you, right? So if you have a 50% show up rate, but you have nothing to compare that 50% show rate to, if you don't know if the industry average is like 30 or 80%, if you have nothing to compare that show rate to, you can't really know if it's good or not. You can't really know if that is a constraint or not. That's just an example. The second thing is you need to be able to compare it to your cost to acquire a customer and the amount that each client is paying you. So, if your show rate and close rate and appointments is bad and you're paying more to acquire a client than the client will actually pay you that you just paid to acquire, then obviously you're going to be losing money. So, essentially, the way that I have applied this is I have constantly been calculating, right, where my next goal is. So right now my next goal is to get to 250K a month, and I have analyzed exactly what numbers need to occur in order for me to hit that. So I know the price I have to charge, I know the amount of appointments I need, I know the amount of close rate that I need, and I know the amount of show rate that I need. It's not really an amount, but I know the show rate that I need to have. So the way that I know that I'm working in the right direction is if I am getting one of those numbers that is currently existing in my business as something that is lower than it needs to be to get to 250K a month, or not. And if I already have, like for example, my show rate is good enough for me to get to 250K a month, so that's not a concern. My close rate is good enough for me to get to 200K a month, so that is not a concern. My appointments right now, we have enough appointments to be able to get to 250K a month. The simple thing is we don't have enough availability to take on those appointments. So the amount of shows we are getting or the amount of appointments we are getting is lower than we need to, simply because we don't have the calendar availability for it, which means I need to get another closer. So that allows me always to know what the main thing is holding me back from getting to where I want to go, and that allows me to actually solve it. You can also, that's more on a macro example. You can also apply this specifically to just client acquisition and appointment setting, and how you can use that to basically get more meetings and more clients. So if you are applying this to appointment setting and you're trying to build an appointment setting system or an appointment setting strategy, you have to understand, again, the same principle is that everything is just numbers. So the way that you do this is, first of all, you need to decide on the niche and the platform that you are going to start doing outreach on. If this is outreach, for example, if it's ads, it's a similar process. Obviously, it's just the platform for ads that you're advertising on. So let's say, for example, we target agency owners, and let's just say, a lot of agency owners are on LinkedIn, which is one of the strategies that we use. So let's just use that as an example. Then what you need to do is you need to come up with a hypothesis. So basically that hypothesis is the numbers that you need to achieve in order for the LinkedIn system to actually get you the amount of clients that you need. So the way that you do that is you reverse engineer. How many appointments do I want? And what percentage of people do I need to send a calendar link to? What percent of the calendar links I send to, need to be interested? And what percent of people that I send an outreach to need to be interested, right? And you can calculate the percentages across the entire appointment setting flow to know exactly what percent of outreaches you need to convert into an appointment in order for you to reach your goal. Now, once you know all of the numbers that you need to hit with your outreach sequence, which, by the way, same thing, it's a lot easier to come up with this hypothesis if you have something to model off of, which is, why it's important to talk with other people in your industry, and why it's important for, to invest in things like this. But yeah, basically you need to define that hypothesis. Once you have an idea of what you need to hit, then you need to test it. If you reach the numbers you are aiming for that you need to get to your goal, then what you do is you just scale the crap out of it and you do as much volume into that system as humanly possible until it breaks. And if it doesn't work at the level that you need it to, then you need to go back to the hypothesis phase and, figure out a different sequence or a different script or a different messaging that you can test in order to reach those numbers to scale. And that's basically how I've built every single strategy that I have for appointment booking. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is basically understanding the dollar value of your time and the dollar value of the tasks that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is kind of a two-part thing. So I'll go into one part of it and we'll go into the other part later. So basically what this means is everything you do, essentially you want to think of as a dollar per hour activity. So for me, right now last month we made $100,000 cash collected. I work about 200 hours a month or so. So if you do the math, I make about $500 an hour. And that's basically that. So what I need to look at is I need to look at every single thing in my calendar. So what I will do is I will just take a week and I will just write every single thing that I do on like a 30-minute basis. So every 30 minutes, I'll go back to this sheet and I'll write down what I've been doing for the last 30 minutes. And I will do that for an entire week. And then after that week, I will look back at all the different things and put them in a list. Then what I will do after that is I will rank them in order of, dollars per hour value. So for example, if you're doing a sales call, let's say, you make 10K from a client and it takes you, 10 sales calls to close one, then that's $1,000 per hour activity, right? You close one out of every 10, that's $1,000 per call. It takes you an hour, $1,000 an hour, right? But some things are less, related to dollars, but you still can, put a dollar on it based on what you would pay someone for it. So like responding to emails, for example, that's probably like a $20 an hour task. So for me, I don't really respond to emails. I have an operations assistant who handles all of the email admin stuff for me, right? Because I realized, why am I going to sacrifice an hour that I could be spending doing a $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 an hour task versus, hiring someone to do that for me. So it's always this ruthless cutting of things that I'm doing that are continually allowing me to do higher leverage things, which is what is propelling the business forward. So right now, like I just said, my biggest constraint is hiring a second sales rep. If you are looking for a sales opportunity, you can go to my website at jkdagency.com. Little plug there, and we're hiring. But that's my biggest constraint right now. And I know if I spend 50 hours to hire, train, ramp a sales rep, let's say 100 hours even, right? If it takes me 100 hours to hire, ramp, and train a sales rep, and let's say over the next 2 years, they can make me $2 million, which is pretty reasonable for a rep, then, $2 million divided by 100 to get that person in is basically $20,000 an hour. So anything that is less than $20,000 an hour is going to come secondary to basically hiring another sales rep. So that's basically the only thing that I'm doing right now, until, I've basically just reached out to every single person in my network, done all the posts and everything like that, which I already have, which is why I'm sitting here making this YouTube video, because that's the next kind of thing that I need to be focusing on, is building the brand, right? But that's kind of how I decide to do that. And the third main thing kind of applies to this. but that is having single points of leverage. So what that essentially means is most people, what they do is they pick all the things that they can do to move the business forward, and they kind of just do all of them without, any kind of priorities, which is obviously not effective. So for example, we can use the same example. I know that me putting every time that is effective, into hiring a sales rep, that is going to be the highest dollar per hour activity that I can do. Now, at this point, I've kind of done all of the main things that I can do in terms of getting to that, getting that sales rep. So then I go back to the list, and then I go into the second highest point of leverage, which right now is going to be, building the brand and building my YouTube channel up and things like that. So that's why I'm doing this. Now, what a lot of people will do is they will just, randomly go about doing, different things. So to give you some context, basically all of last yesterday and the first part of today, like the last 16 hours I've been working, has literally all been just sending messages to people, asking if they know any sales reps, sending email lists to my email list. If you're on my email list, you know that I just sent out an email. I even posted on my YouTube community thing, which I don't know if that does anything, but I made a post there. I made a post on my free school group. Like every single hour was solely focused on the highest point of leverage, the highest dollar per hour activity, which is finding a second sales rep, right? It wasn't split between doing other things. It was just doing that one thing. So what you need to identify is obviously what is the biggest constraint in your business, but not like being aware of that and doing like a little bit about it. That should be the only thing you are doing, and everything else that is not absolutely mission critical should be put to the side so that you can do that later, right? And that's how you're going to be able to scale the fastest. So that's basically the main three things I learned. Now, if you are a normal civilian and you have made a comment talking about how this was a terrible investment, I will say this, is that the value of information is not about the information, right? Obviously, me just saying a bunch of words, I just said it on this YouTube video, and this YouTube video is not worth $48,000, although maybe it is, right? But probably not. The value in information is about the application of the information based on your specific situation. So I know that where I was at in business with these three ideas was the most important thing that I needed to hear, that after I implemented has made me significantly more than $48,000. Like being able to see business as a collection of numbers, being able to evaluate my time based on dollars per hour, being able to singularly focus on the most important thing in my company has made me well over $48,000. And because of that, it is worth the money that I paid to hear those things at a specific point in my career. So that's basically that. If you found this video helpful, then you can subscribe or whatever, and I'll see you later.